Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Hello, girls, and welcome back to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Siggy, one of the WFA's educators and a women's mindset and body image coach. Today, I'm sitting down as if like we're on the couch together. We're like facing virtually, but I am chatting today with Shannon, who is a nutrition coach, specializes in body confidence, where she helps restrictive eaters to overcome their appearance concerns and make sustainable life changes so they can feel more in control around normal food. Feeling more control and normal around food and comfortable in their bodies and they're present in their lives. Shannon, I want to thank you so much for jumping on today. And I would love to start the conversation. What made you become this health and confidence coach?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And thank you for having me on. The main thing that led me in this direction was that I started off as a nutritionist and realized that this is what people really needed, because people were coming to me to lose fat because they didn't feel good in their bodies. And I realized through experience that simply helping someone to lose fat without helping them to appreciate their bodies, without helping them to get in touch with their values and what was truly important to them, solely focusing on fat loss wasn't enough. It was kind of just scratching the surface. And some people really struggled with that. Some people, it did work and it was just like, thanks, that was great, bye. And I was like, oh, cool. I didn't really feel like I was helping that much. And there was one client in particular who was a powerlifter. She was relatively physically healthy and came to coaching because she had a specific goal weight in mind. And it was only a few kilos off her current weight anyway. And we were getting pretty close, and there was maybe like 1 kilo left. And it just stopped working in the sense that she was stressing about eating out on the weekends. She really enjoyed going to brunch with her friends, and that became just a source of stress because it was like, how do I, what am I going to eat? And do I go for what I really want to go for, or should I just go for what I know is lowest in calories? And then what about the rest of the day? And this is so stressful. Now I'm just don't want to think about anything at all. And her weight was plateauing, and I just couldn't understand, why not just let it go? Like, what difference is a kilo going to make? And it's clearly not adding anything to your life at this point. You're not even going to look that different. Like, what's the big deal? Obviously I didn't say that, but that's what got me really interested in the research on dietary restraint, which led me down the body image route, because that kept coming up. And I was like, why have I not really been educated on body image at all, when it's so clear that so many of my clients struggle with feeling dissatisfied in their body and motivated to change their nutrition for that reason primarily? And yeah, that led to me incorporating some body image work into my coaching, and people really, really liked it, in the sense that it made such a big difference to their well-being. I had clients saying, my whole life has changed, which makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because the way that we feel about our body affects how we show up in our lives. When we don't like how we look, we avoid drawing attention to our appearance. We may get stressed again with eating out. We fear fat gain. The scale dictates our mood for the day. We hold ourselves back from meeting new people because we're conscious about what they might think about how we look. So we're always worried about what other people think. We're comparing ourselves to other people. When you free yourself from all of that, that gives you so much headspace to focus on what really matters to you, who you want to be and how you want to live. So that's kind of the work that I do now. And that's what I really enjoy helping people with.
I love that so much. And I respect the path that you've taken as well, because too often we stay in this one little fixed box. As you mentioned, you were a nutritionist, but then you notice all these connecting dots from, their mental health to the body image, to the confidence piece. And it just opens our minds around, actually, it has nothing to do with the food, but it has everything to do with the actual mental capacity around how they feel and look. And this is so common And too often, and as you mentioned, this is something that many women don't realize, that this is a major cock block in their results, is something that's holding them back so often from achieving their goals. And I would love to know, like, what are some common challenges women face when it comes to body confidence, and like, how do you address this in your coaching?
I think some of the challenges would be the belief that I cannot feel better in my body until it changes. I'll feel better when I weigh a certain amount, when I have a certain level of leanness, and helping someone to realize that the way they feel in their body has less to do with how they physically look and a lot more to do with their perception of themselves, because we don't always see ourselves accurately. You know, we'll stand in the mirror and we'll pick apart flaws that we can see that no one else would even notice. You know, we think people are looking at certain parts of ourselves and they're not. And the other component is the standards that we're holding ourselves to. So if you internalize this idea, which is sold to us, so it's not our fault for, you know, falling into this trap, but we internalize this idea where people will not be attracted to me unless I look like this. I'm not going to be respected by others unless I look like this. And it's a lot to do with what other people think of us rather than what we think of ourselves. And helping people to see that you can choose to, yes, still have a preference for how you look. We all want to look nice, and that's perfectly fine. And we can express our personal style and care for our appearance in healthy ways, but letting go of the idea that it has to be this one specific look and everyone has to enjoy that. You know, everyone has to find me attractive, and I cannot possibly feel better about myself until I've achieved that. The problem with that line of thinking is that oftentimes we don't ever get there, because sometimes these standards are unattainable, or it's in order to maintain and achieve and maintain that body composition, we would have to sacrifice parts of our lives that we really value. You know, the freedom to go out and enjoy our food, the ability to make health conscious choices without excessive food preoccupation. You know, we want the headspace to dedicate to our life goals and our career goals. We don't want to be stressing about how much we're eating all the time. And that's very hard to do when you're tightly, like, focused on tightly controlling your body composition. So I would say that that's one barrier. The second barrier would be having people in your life that do reinforce the idea that you need to look different. Oftentimes I'll work with women who even have partners who will say, yeah, actually, I preferred you when you were a bit smaller, you know, or friends and family members saying, you know, you shouldn't be eating that. Or someone who is currently struggling with their weight as they see it and their health. You know, they're like, well, I do want to eat better and I want to look good, and this needs to happen now because I'm sick of feeling this way. And it's very difficult to help people to say, I totally understand why you feel the urge, you know, and I know that you want to treat your body better. And my concern is that when we're focused on this, we're going to extreme lengths, because we cannot bear to be in the body that we're in. We don't like how other people treat us. We want to be close to our partners. You know, we want them to find us attractive. And again, all of that, perfectly natural, perfectly normal. And yet, when we're feeling so distressed, we're not acting in healthy ways. We may ignore our hunger and then excessively overeat later because we finally give in. You know, we may succumb to thoughts about what other people think about us over what we think about ourselves. And helping people to see that it's not about giving up on yourself. It's not about not caring at all. It's about valuing yourself and respecting yourself and treating your body with respect, which does include making health conscious food choices and does include moving your body regularly, not for the purpose of calorie burn, not for the purpose of controlling your body in an attempt to lose fat, but for the purpose of treating your body the way you want to feel, because we feel good when we move our bodies regularly. We feel good with a mostly healthy diet, but that also gives you room to enjoy your food, to be present with other people, and to focus on becoming the person you want to be and valuing your opinion of yourself over what other people think of you. And that's such an empowering shift to make, but it can be very difficult to help people to see that that is a possibility for them.
You made such valid points there, and literally as you were talking, I'm like nodding my head going yes, yes. And I can relate to that personally, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are in this little puddle of, you know, uncertainty around their body image due to the fact of either being in an environment of people criticizing them for how they eat, which happens a lot. You'd think by now people would just mind their own business, yet people are still projecting and telling you, oh, should you be eating that? Are you eating enough? And so forth. And that can be quite disheartening for someone who is fighting against themselves in front of the mirror.
Absolutely, absolutely. So often what we'll work on is one, strengthening that self-validation, where actually this is what I'm focusing on. I know why I'm making these choices, and these are important choices for me. This is who I want to be. And then if I need to practice some assertive communication, I can do that, where I reinforce what I want to believe about myself, and I can filter out unhelpful influences, and I can take advice on board. I'm not defensive, but if something's unhelpful and I don't need that in my life, I can tell that person too. So sometimes assertiveness training comes into the coaching as well to help people to focus on, again, what's really important to them. And this is such an important skill, to be able to filter influences in ways which are helpful, recognizing what's helpful and unhelpful, letting the helpful stuff in, and then pushing the unhelpful stuff out. And again, that's not defensiveness, that's having a filter that you can identify when it's helpful, when it's not, because the environment that we're living in often isn't conducive to self-acceptance, often isn't conducive even to making healthy food choices anyway, right? It's no obesogenic environment to begin with. But we are going to be subject to external influences. And it is our responsibility to recognize how we are influenced, as, again, knowing that's how our brains work. We do take on board the opinions of others. We care. We want to fit in. We're social creatures. Understanding that and having compassion for that, and then choosing to act in ways that are helpful to you.
Let's talk more about that external influences and also the validation, because you've mentioned really good 2 points here, that we are influenced by our environment. However, these days I've noticed there's also quite a largely negative shift towards the beauty standards. And it's no wonder why we feel so pressurized to look a certain way or be a certain type of person. What are some things, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, could you share a key mindset shift or a strategy for someone to help them overcome this? I know awareness comes with the idea of this, but is there something else maybe?
Yeah, I do think the awareness piece is important. Firstly, being aware of what's important to you. So one thing that most of my clients will do to begin with is we do an exercise where they clarify their values, which is identifying not goals that I want to achieve, but qualities and characteristics that I want to embody in my life. So what kind of person do I consider myself to be? Am I someone, or do I want to become someone who is fun and outgoing and spontaneous? Well, how does my obsession with macro tracking and my inflexibility in going out and making plans, how does that align with my value of fun and spontaneity, right? Or maybe I really value challenge, and actually I'm going to challenge myself not to achieve this ideal physique, but actually to learn a new language, pick up a new hobby, like do things that add more to my life and not take away from my life. So we will do that, the values clarification, and then that helps clients to identify, oh, actually, when I am hyper fixated on controlling my body composition, I'm often acting out of alignment with my values. And instead, I would like to be doing these other things. One thing that comes up often is presence and connection. I want to be connected to my partner, my friends, my family. When I'm worrying about food, I'm not present with them because that interferes with that experience. So that's something that we work on a lot. So that would be one thing. The other is, as you say, becoming aware of all of the external influences that can have an effect on how we feel about ourselves. And one big one that you alluded to is the media. So nowadays we have access to social media where we can compare ourselves multiple times a day, multiple times any moment, to other people's lifestyles, which we know are portrayed as a highlight, right? And even when we see the logic in that, that can be very difficult to break out of. So what we will do often in coaching is work on those social comparisons, because sometimes you'll hear the advice, don't compare yourself to other people. Comparison is the thief of joy. And it's like, great, if you're not a human being, because if you have a human brain, it is designed to make comparisons. There is a reason that we do that. We assess our social standing because it is a protective mechanism, because if we were ostracized from the group back in the day, we would not have survived. So we cannot switch off these social comparisons. However, we can catch ourselves when we're making them. We can check our comparisons to assess, am I like making some assumptions here? Are these comparisons biased? For example, I will often work with people whose job is not in the fitness industry. You know, they have other jobs, and they'll compare themselves to like professional athletes. And we're like, is this a fair comparison? Am I neglecting the fact that this is this person's literal career and they live in the gym, and you're, you know, trying to juggle a job and kids and having hobbies? You know, it's like, oh, actually, yeah, maybe I am being a bit unfair on myself. So we go through that process, and then we can correct our comparisons so that we can turn them into something that is inspirational, because comparing yourself to other people doesn't always have to be a bad thing. It's not necessarily the thief of joy, because comparisons can actually be a great source of inspiration. So you can look to that professional athlete and think, wow, isn't it amazing what our bodies can do? I wonder what my own body can do. You know, last time when I was in the gym, I did this, this, and this. I might see if I can push myself a little bit more just to see what that could be like. You know, so you can turn it into something that is helpful. It becomes unhelpful when we use that as fuel to criticize ourselves with. Oh, well, you're not good enough because you're not that person. You don't look like that. You need to change. Instead of, wow, I wonder what my body can do. So comparisons and turning them into something that is helpful is something that we'll often work on a lot. So that might be something to be mindful of, catching yourself when you're making these comparisons. And then also recognizing that the way you treat your body will influence how you feel about it. So a lot of people, when they don't like how they look, guess what they do? They don't treat their bodies well. They ignore their hunger. They excessively exercise. They feel guilty when they take a rest. You know, all of these things. How do you expect to feel good in your body when you're treating it like shit? You know, so that's something to really think about. Oh, actually, my own behaviors are influencing the way that I feel. And if I want to feel better, I have to start treating myself better before I can feel that way. Because it's impossible to feel good in your body if you're picking it apart, if you're ignoring it, if you're taking it to extremes. That doesn't feel good. So in order to feel better, you have to change the way that you think about yourself, and you have to change the way that you treat yourself. And then that happiness, that comfort in your body follows from those changes.
And still people are doing it back to front. And unfortunately, as you mentioned, like it takes time to, you know, go over those hurdles and noticing the mistakes that we're making, and again, make those better choices. And I absolutely love the fact that you brought on the comparison piece, because that is something that I teach my clients as well, in regards to, you know, comparison doesn't necessarily have to always be a negative realm, which everyone says it is a negative thing. It's like, how do we switch the narrative and make people understand, is this comparison actually validating your, you know, your reasons of change and success, or is it actually deterring you? And it's so common to see the 9 to 5 girl comparing herself to an influencer or a bodybuilder, you know, with their morning routines, where they're eating, like, eat with me, or what's that one, what I eat in a day, and so forth. And it's just like, it's not realistic to everyone. So I love the fact that you've brought that up to shine the light on those who have been comparing themselves. And the last point that you made on as well is how we treat ourselves is how we're going to feel about ourselves. And if we're constantly battling ourselves, of course, we're not going to feel good about it because we're treating ourselves like shit. So it's bringing that awareness in, going, cool, if I value health, how can I be more healthy? What changes do I need to make? If you're someone who's going to bed at midnight and waking up the next day really early and not getting enough quality sleep, of course, that's going to affect your mental state. Of course, you're going to feel like shit throughout the day.
Absolutely. And I think oftentimes we have this very narrow definition of health where we think health looks like being super lean, when sometimes that can actually take away from your health. But also we tend to think about health in terms of physical health only. We don't think about our emotional well-being. We don't think about our social health. We don't think about our intellectual or philosophical health, where we're thinking about, what do I want to achieve in my life? You know, what do I find stimulating and challenging? And when you broaden your perspective on what it means to be healthy, you can also see that that opens up the possibilities of all of these different behaviors that you can engage in that support your health. And you can choose to do that right now. You don't tick it off when you hit a goal weight. You can choose to treat your body differently right now. And you can celebrate that choice every time you make it, which multiple possibilities throughout the day. Choosing to have breakfast in the morning when you actually start to get hungry, rather than pushing it off because it's too early to eat. You know, that would be a health conscious choice that also supports your goal of feeling better in your body, because it helps you to develop that trust with your body. My body knows what it needs and it will tell me when it needs it. And I have to trust that, and I can give it what it needs, right? It's that relationship. And it's so funny because we'll put so much energy into our relationships with other people, and yet your relationship with yourself is the longest relationship you will ever have. And how much attention are you paying to that? Probably not a lot at all. So when we talk about working on body image, it's not just about, oh, love every part of yourself and accept yourself and never do anything differently because you're perfect the way that you are. Like, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about letting go of the unhelpful ways of thinking, letting go of the excessive picking ourselves apart, and moving towards this relationship that's cultivated on trust and respect and appreciation. That's something that you can achieve because, again, your relationship with yourself is something that you're going to have for the rest of your life. You live in your own head 24/7. Why not make it a nice place to be? You know, in a place that is empowering, and a place that moves you towards all these things that you want to achieve in life, not something that becomes an obstacle to that. So one of the other things that we'll work on in terms of a mindset shift is thinking about yourself as a person, not as an object, not as a body. You weren't put on this earth to be worshipped for how you look. Again, that's nice, and a compliment will feel good, great. But thinking about, who am I as a person and how do I want to live? And what areas of my life are currently being affected by the way that I feel in my body? Because maybe I'm not asserting myself, maybe I'm not putting myself out there, maybe I'm not being outgoing, maybe I'm not going for these career opportunities because I think I'm going to be judged for how I look. And again, sometimes that judgment is real. Sometimes people will judge you based on your appearance. And that's when it comes back to that self-validation, knowing that somebody else's judgment of you is not a reflection of who you are. That's a reflection of their mindset, not you. So making that distinction is, again, another empowering shift that we go through in coaching.
Judgment and criticism is such a big hit to our ego and to that self-esteem, especially around body confidence and just having a strong mindset around it. And I do believe that when it comes to that self-acceptance role, it can deter someone's confidence around that. And again, as you mentioned, you know, self-acceptance is not necessarily just us loving every, bit of ourselves, even though we don't, because I feel as if though we're kind of like deflecting the way we actually feel. It's like masking my problems. Like, yeah, everything's fine. But then you look at yourself in the mirror again, you're like, actually, I hate everything about myself. And you revert back to those old habits. So in your experience, when we're looking at the role of self-acceptance and how it plays in body confidence, how else would you guide women to become more comfortable in their own bodies?
Yeah, so self-acceptance is actually just about developing a realistic self-view where you are objective, where you recognize that all human beings have strengths and weaknesses. We all have flaws or things that we perceive to be flaws, and that makes you a human being. And having that understanding allows you to, it creates a space where you can say, actually, yeah, these are the things that I am unhappy with. It gives you power to make a change because you're not pretending, you're being honest with yourself, but you're not putting yourself down for the things that you're dissatisfied with. So you can say, actually, yeah, I'm not happy with the way that I've been eating recently because it's not acting in accordance with my desire to be healthy, my desire to fuel my body for the activities that I want to do in life. I don't like how I feel when I avoid my emotions and turn to food. I actually realize and recognize that I use food as a relief for how I'm feeling. And that's not an empowering way to treat myself. That doesn't make me greedy. That doesn't make me a lazy piece of shit. That doesn't make me anything, that I'm making it mean. It just means that, oh, actually, right now, I'm struggling with learning how to manage my emotions without food. That's what I'm struggling with. There's no need to go beyond that and add judgment. Just that neutral observation of, oh, I am doing this and I don't like it and I want to change it. And from that position, you can make changes. Whereas if you're telling yourself that either you're in denial, and you're saying, oh, just pretend that everything's okay, that's not helpful. But also if you say, I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this, and oh my God, I'm just so useless, and you start going down that spiral, that's not helpful either. So self-acceptance is that recognition that, oh, people do struggle. My struggles are normal. I can understand why I'm in this position. We never ever learn how to regulate our emotions, and actually having a human brain is quite a tricky thing to manage. And my environment is not set up for my well-being, so of course I'm going to struggle. I can learn how to support myself in this context. And self-acceptance is such an empowering place to be. And it can be very difficult to achieve, because we are sold this idea of perfection. Most people do not like to admit or acknowledge when they're struggling, let alone like to other people, not even to themselves half the time. We fear judgment from others. If I tell someone that I'm struggling, that puts me in a vulnerable position. I don't know what's going to happen from that point. And sometimes, maybe in our upbringing, we did open up and it was not helpful. Maybe we told someone how we're feeling and they didn't help us in that situation, and maybe they made us feel worse. So of course you learn to hide things, you learn to pretend to be okay when actually it's possible to experience these relationships. And this is why I think coaching can be so powerful, because you're able to speak to someone who is there, who genuinely cares for you and wants the best for you and is committed to helping you to support yourself. And you've got that space where you can say, I really feel like I fucked up this week. And the response that you get is not going to be, yes, what are we going to do different this week? Or, it's not that kind of coaching. It's, okay, tell me more about that. Where do you feel, at what point do you feel like you fucked up? What makes this a fuck up in your opinion, right? What would be a more helpful way of looking at this? Oh, so it got to the end of the week and you were feeling really tired and stressed and you ordered out for convenience. Cool. Like, what did we learn about this? Oh, I learned that actually I'm finding work quite stressful right now. And I don't have other options of relieving my stress. So the food comes in. That part of me that's making those decisions wants me to feel better. It's just not thinking long term. So what can we do with that information? Again, don't need to judge myself, don't need to put myself down, but I can choose to make different choices. And it's a lack of self-acceptance, it's a lack of self-compassion that leads to repeating the same patterns because we don't evaluate and reflect, because it's too painful to reflect when you're putting yourself down. So when you let go of that criticism, when you lean into that criticism and see beyond it, what does that part of you that's trying to motivate you but actually is making it worse, what does that part of you want? Oh, it wants the best for you. It wants you to make different decisions. Guess what? That's your desire to care for yourself. So developing acceptance isn't going to lead to letting yourself go. It's about taking care of yourself in more helpful ways, because the way that you're currently speaking to yourself is making that harder. So I think that that's such an eye-opener for a lot of people, that, oh yeah, well, I'm trying to help myself, but it's making it feel worse. That then creates a space to think about, so what would be helpful? You know, when I'm noticing the criticism come up, so I will actually work with a lot of other coaches as well, and they'll say, I feel like a fraud for promoting body confidence when actually I don't feel good in my body and I want to change how I look. Now, like, fuck, I feel like a fraud, right? Because I'm supposed to be promoting this acceptance and actually I want to change. And it's like, well, that's a really interesting experience, because you clearly care about this work, you believe in this work. What do you think, like, what signal do you think your body is sending you? And then they realize that, oh, actually, I've been so focused on coaching and growing my business that I've been neglecting my own needs. I work through lunch, you know, so it gets to the end of the day, I barely have the energy to train. I have like a half-assed workout, and then I go home and I'm annoyed with myself. And then when I'm annoyed with myself, I think, fuck it, and I want to feel better. So I make food choices that I don't really want to be making. So it's like that realization that, oh, my body sends me signals, my criticism sends me signals, it's trying to tell me something. I just have to try and understand myself and work with myself. And that's where you get to a position where you are able to make these changes in a way that's driven by your desire to care for yourself, not by a desire to fix yourself or to prove yourself to other people, because that's totally different.
Oh, it's such a powerful way of looking at it, especially for coaches. I find this is such a common theme, and for women as well, but mainly for coaches, around having to show up a certain way or have this facade of they have all their shit together. And the fact is, like, no one has their shit together. We all have our flaws and we're all working through it. And I find that through coaching, it's such a really cool way to mirror and reflect our own limitations. So that way we can, you know, hold hand in hand with our coach or with our clients and have that time of investment and reflection to really figure out what it is that we value, but also kick those older habits or the self-sabotaging beliefs to the curb. Because too often, and I'm sure you've seen this a lot, is this dreaded cycle of dieting and the fear of eating more food. And this is in relation to not only your everyday woman, but coaches as well, you know, especially in the fitness industry, having to look or wanting to look a certain way. They get caught up in this like self-sabotage pattern at some point, and they know it's not healthy. They know it's not serving them purpose. They lose their sex drive. They lose their period, but yet they keep going in circles because they have this fear of, you know, what if I gain more weight, or what if I don't deserve to have this body or look better? But at the end of the day, like, you have the tools to do it. But too often, as you mentioned, it's this limiting belief around it.
And it's so funny with the fear of fat gain, is that we don't really think beyond that. It's like, oh, I step on the scale, it's gone up, and it's like this threat mode. What are you actually scared of? What do you think is going to happen if you gain, in your mind, excessive amounts of fat? You know, so I'll sometimes work with people who have previously lived in larger bodies, lost weight of their own accord, and then developed very inflexible, rigid behaviors because they really don't want to go back to that place. And they really, really want to maintain the body that's probably received a lot of positive reinforcement and maybe attention that they've never had before. Of course, that feels good. You want to feel appreciated. You want to feel loved. You want to feel valued. Now, what is it you think you're scared of when you see the number going up? You're scared of feeling underappreciated. You're scared of being rejected by other people. You're not scared of carrying a little bit of extra body fat, because you wouldn't, that in itself doesn't lead to anything. Some people actually benefit greatly from gaining a little bit of body fat if they've been trying to maintain a physique that's actually not healthy, because we don't even think about the consequences and the dangers of being underweight or too lean, especially as a woman, right? And that, when you understand that, what are you actually scared of, that gives you, again, an indication of what it is that you need. If you're scared of losing relationships, people thinking of you in negative ways, what does that indicate that you need? Maybe you're currently lacking positive, meaningful relationships. Maybe what you want to do is start seeking connection, not controlling your diet to excessive amounts. Maybe you actually want to be going to meetup groups and picking up a new hobby and meeting people that you have common interests with. Or maybe you already have supportive relationships in your life and you don't let people support you. So you feel alone. And then you feel like you need to maintain this body because you want to be close to people and you think that's what you need to do to be appreciated, rather than paying attention to the fact that actually you already have people in your life and they want to care for you, but you're not letting them. And that's something that I think, particularly as women, we tend to have difficulty letting other people care for us, because we have been conditioned to believe that it's our role to care for other people. So then when it comes to caring for yourself, you're way low down on this like hierarchy. Well, let me take care of this person. And I completely understand if you've got kids and you're a mother, of course, that's your role. But again, your role is also to support yourself. And sometimes supporting yourself means letting other people support you too. And that's a big learning curve for a lot of people, because it's like they are driven to control their body so that they can feel loved. But then there are people in their life trying to love them and they're not letting them. So it's like, you're never going to get to that point unless you allow people to care for you and you start caring for yourself. So that's also something that I think we don't speak about a lot, is what is this fear of fat gain really representing? Because when we're trying to achieve this idealized body, these bodies that are idealized, these athletic, muscular, lean female physiques, are often at the lower end of the healthy weight spectrum, meaning that there's a big gap there of flexibility in terms of how much your body weight could fluctuate and how much your body fat levels could fluctuate, and you would still be healthy. So we fear these tiny amounts of weight gain, and what we're, I guess, telling ourselves that means is so far from what's actually happening in reality that it's really worth thinking about, what do I actually think is going to happen if I lose weight? Sometimes people will say, well, I just feel like I'm losing control. Okay, well, where is that sense of control coming from? When you're trying to control your food, you're probably not trusting your body, recognizing that our body has hormones that regulate our hunger. It likes to stay in homeostasis. It's trying to keep us alive. And, excessively gaining weight forevermore and never stopping isn't the path to health. Your body doesn't want that. So let your body do what it needs to do and trust that, So it really is really insightful and useful to explore, what does that fear actually mean to me? What am I actually scared of? And if it's things like relating to other people, how can you seek those connections? So again, for people who are struggling maybe with their partners, I feel like our libido is mismatched. I feel like he doesn't find me attractive anymore. He hasn't said that, but I just feel like he doesn't. Okay, what are you actually seeking? You're seeking connection with your partner. That doesn't necessarily come through dieting. How else can you establish a connection with someone? Have you told him about how you're feeling? Have you planned a date night away from your phones? Have you made these changes? Because that's going to lead to the outcome that you desire. So getting to know your fears is really useful, because it helps you to identify what needs aren't being met. And then you can meet those needs in other ways. And once you do that, the fear of letting go of this excessive control fades away, because it's suddenly not as scary anymore, because you have what you need in your life. And that's when these disordered eating behaviors come in. They're an attempt to meet a need that isn't being met. And it's very, very difficult to let go of those things when that need is still being unmet. you have to find out what that is that you're missing, and then find out how you can get that in your life. And then it's safe to let go of the excessive preoccupation with food, or the cutting out certain foods, the not eating when you're hungry. All of those behaviors can be let go of because you feel safe, you feel respected, you feel appreciated, you feel engaged and excited by your life because you've got all these things going on, and you're satisfied with who you are, and you're proud of who you are. All of a sudden, it's not that big a deal to not count your calories if you don't want to. It's like, oh well, whatever, I can take it or leave it, because I'm empowered, and I like who I am, and I'm trusting my ability to treat myself well.
And tracking food has such a big effect on mental health and body image, negatively and positively, but too often it's negatively impacted for many women. Again, it's like having a sense of control of meeting a certain target of calories, and if they go over, it's just like, oh, God forbid I have to go and exercise more. I just don't eat for the rest of the day. And I do sense, well, I can speak this from experience and working with clients as well, is this sense of control, again, can come from something that's missing in their life, as you mentioned, whether it's like the connection socially, intimately, or mentally as well. I find that a lot of people are very disconnected with themselves. And we touched on about this just earlier, is they just don't know what they're wanting because they're fed and influenced by so many people around them. So it's just like, well, no wonder I'm so fucking confused. I have no idea what I'm wanting to do. But then you sit down with yourself, and as you mentioned, the fears show up. And a lot of people don't want to face those fears because they're worried of what's going to come up. And this is such a catch-22. But when you have a person being able to be aware of what those fears are, what are they embarrassed about, what have they been missing out on, it literally just shines this light on their life going, oh, this is why this is happening. Like, how can we make this change? And once they make those changes, everything they weren't able to let go of, they just surrender, and everything becomes so much better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest blocks that some people experience is, what if I try it and it doesn't work? Like that fear of, well, I feel like I've tried everything. This is like the only thing I haven't done yet. If that doesn't work, I truly am fucked. Like, that's what, the trap that people fall into.
Yeah.
And it's so, like, it's such a shame to see that as a coach, when I can help this person, or there is appropriate help out there. If I can't help them, someone else can. You don't have to live like this, but doing it in a way where it's also like, we're not going to just throw ourselves into the deep end and try and figure it out. It's like you're taking small steps where, hey, this is one thing that I do feel capable of tackling right now, and then you achieve that, and you're like, okay, well, maybe I can let go of this thing, and maybe I can think about eating when I'm hungry, and maybe I can think about adding more food to my meal so that I'm actually eating meals and not snacks for meals, like small steps that you can take, and doing it in a way where you're not totally overwhelming yourself, and you're not jumping straight into like these really painful experiences, but actually just strengthening yourself bit by bit, so that you can think, oh, actually, this makes a lot of sense, like why I do this, and it is holding me back in certain ways, and now I feel like there is a path forwards. It's that small step-by-step process that you just have to start. It's not about fixing everything and solving everything and being like this superhuman person, and if it doesn't work, then that's it, there's no options. It's, no, I'm just going to start by improving my feelings and improving my life bit by bit. Where can I start? What would be helpful for me? And just like shifting that perspective of, okay, I'm currently unhappy and I don't like my body, but I'm not going to fight it anymore. I'm going to learn to work with it so that I can feel good about it. It's a big perspective shift, and it doesn't happen overnight necessarily, but just having that intention to care for yourself is like the foundation of being successful in your health and fitness pursuits, and then making space for other things in your life. So I think that if you can recognize that, oh, that is something that I would like, then that's a fantastic place to start.
It definitely is. And too often people fall into that realm, as you said, like, what if it goes wrong? Instead of actually just giving a go. And I do honestly believe it comes from this sense of control and that the all or nothing mindset.
Yeah. And when we're controlling everything, we feel safe. You know, I can count my calories and yeah, like I have, not a lot of headspace left, but at least I'm not fat. Like that's what people will tell themselves, right? And it's like, cool, you can do that. What's that costing you in the long run? This sense of a lack of connection with other people. Like deep down, that it's not fulfilling in this context. I'm not saying it's always wrong, but in this context, it's not fulfilling. And you know that. And when you're honest with yourself, that's not what you want. And if you were confident that you could feel the way that you want to feel without having to stress and control everything, if you knew that was an option, you would take it if you believed in it, right? You're not choosing to control everything because you love all of the consequences. There's always going to be a consequence if it's causing a problem. So thinking about that, what is the cost? Where am I going in the long run if I don't address this now? And on the flip side, if I did have more headspace, if I felt appreciated, if I appreciated myself, how would my life be different? I could wake up in the morning, wouldn't necessarily feel the need to weigh myself. I could go about my day. I could enjoy my food, knowing that I'm making choices that are fueling me for the life that I want to live. I can take those opportunities, to throw myself into my career when that arises. I have the flexibility to engage in hobbies when someone wants to make spontaneous plans and, oh, it was supposed to be leg day. It's fine. I can go and I can be flexible about that because I know that I'm taking care of myself. And I know that most things aren't that big a deal. And I'm saying yes to experiences and being present in my life and really thinking about who I want to be over just viewing myself as a body. Because when I view myself that way, I am telling myself that there's nothing more important than looking good. And when I'm honest with myself, that's not what I believe. So I'm going to start living in accordance with who I want to be, because if I don't do that, my life will always feel small. I'll get this like illusion of control, but it won't actually be satisfying. So when we're honest with ourselves, we know that we want more. And it's just having that pathway to actually getting there in a way that feels challenging, but not overwhelming.
It's so refreshing to hear that as well from a coach, because too often people, not coaches only, but with women, they want to feel more in control. And we know that it's not going to serve them a purpose long-term because, again, they're just masking these problems over and over again. And what you've shared has been really insightful in terms of giving people advice around how to live a sustainable lifestyle without constantly thinking about how they look, about really looking deep down inside and feeling about how they're wanting to feel inside. And you mentioned also overcoming challenges and roadblocks. And right now, for the last 6 years, you've been traveling. And I'm sure during your time in travel, you've experienced some certain influences and challenges during your time. But also, I would love to know, like, what are some cultural exposure influences in your coaching approach has helped your clients achieve a sense of freedom in their own lifestyle?
Yeah, I think traveling has had such a positive effect on my own body image and my own relationship with food, because it forces you to be flexible. Sometimes I'll be eating in places I don't even know what I'm eating. If I'm in these random places around the world, I don't know what I'm eating some of the time. And I'm so focused on the experience that I'm having. And yes, I know that I can trust myself. I want to be healthy, so I'm going to make conscious choices, but I'm also going to make flexible choices. And I want to enjoy food. I want to have these different experiences. And on the body image side of things, being exposed to so many different cultures, I don't internalize this one specific way of looking good. Yes, I enjoy a muscular and lean physique. I like to be athletic. I play different sports, I engage in these things, but I also really appreciate a variety of different appearances. I went to Korea last year, and seeing the personal style there, such a stylish, that obviously I'm making a massive generalization, but seeing how different people dress is one thing that I really enjoy. Seeing different skin colors, hair colors, all these different things I've been exposed to, where it's not just like when I go back to the UK, I'm shocked by the amount of makeup, the amount of surgery, the falseness of everything, in the sense that fake nails, I dye my hair. I'm not against enhancing your appearance, go for it, whatever. But it was a massive shock to go from a place where people don't really wear makeup, they're not concerned about how they look. So that understanding that appearance is valued differently across cultures makes you realize that, oh, I've just bought into one way of thinking, and it's not the same in different places around the world. I went to Vietnam, was the first place I went. They loved the fact that I was so white. I was almost see-through. I was so pale. Whereas back home, it's oh, get a tan, sun's out, come on, let's go, and it's well, when I go to Vietnam, they love my skin. So all of this is bullshit, really, when you think about it. And that was such an empowering realization, but also the fact that it forced me to be flexible, because I would be on islands where there was no gym access. And if I was oh my God, I'm going to lose muscle, one, you don't lose muscle in the space of a week, obviously nothing's going to happen, but also being forced to be flexible and realizing that I don't want to be tied down to this rigid routine. I don't want to be someone who can't go somewhere unless there's a gym. I would love a gym if that was an option, but I could go for a run. I could take a rest for a week and just travel and explore. I can hike, I can swim. There are so many different ways to move my body. So I'm not tied to any one way. And obviously, if I was set on maintaining this specific physique, I would be anxious about the fact that I'm not getting in enough volume for hypertrophy, because it's well, never mind that you're on an island and having a great time. What if your muscles are shrinking? So I realized that I didn't want to be the kind of person that is tied down to having to have a specific routine. I want to be flexible enough to jump into that routine when I have the capacity and my environment supports that and I really enjoy it, but also have the flexibility to adapt to different situations and keep that health and fitness perspective in perspective with my overall life, which also includes having these experiences. And I think that benefits my clients because they get to see how that flexibility plays out in my life, and they gain some vicarious confidence where they're able to take the brave steps and think about how they can be a little bit more flexible in their own lives. So I've had some clients say, I really want to try jiu-jitsu, and it seems like something I really enjoy, but I'm worried about not training weights for one day, training 3 times a week instead of 4 times. What if I lose muscle? So they're so set on sticking to this bodybuilding style of working out, and they're not allowing themselves to try yoga, try jiu-jitsu, because they're scared of what that will do to their body composition. But then I think it helps to see that someone else is saying, actually, this is how I want to live, this is what I value, and I'm going to go and do that. That gives them a bit of confidence to think, oh, actually, yeah, maybe I can give this a go. Maybe I can just try it and see how I feel.
It's so powerful to have that better understanding around movement, again, because too often we'll be niched in one box of wanting to just do one type of movement, whether it's strength training, whether it's yoga, whatever, but have that fear of letting go of what would happen if you do something completely different and be flexible. And again, as you mentioned from the start of the conversation, is building that self-awareness. Exactly, knowing why you're so wanting to be in control of your body, and how can we shift that perspective to living life fuller according to your values, not just for the external perceptions of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sitting down to clarify your values is such an important thing to do, because that really guides your behavior. And for most people, again, that will include, yeah, I want to move my body to support my health. I want to eat well so that I can feel good day to day, but I also value challenge, fun, connection, peace with myself, joy, self-respect. And then that helps you to see, oh, maybe there are some things that I'm not doing, or maybe there are things I am doing that aren't helping me. And this is who I want to be. So stepping into that version of yourself, it's difficult to do unless you sit down and think, who do I actually want to be? And how do I really want to live? And then what needs to be different in order for me to do that, right? So taking some time, I think, to sit down and think about what's important to you is such a great place to start, because that can really guide your decision making and your behaviors from there onwards.
I'm sure everyone right now is writing all of those questions down.
And they're hard questions to answer. Who do I want to be? How do I want to live? These are big questions. But if you don't do that, are you just going to mindlessly stumble through life and hope that things work out? Or are you going to take ownership and choose your direction and figure out how to support yourself along the way?
I totally agree. And I would definitely prefer that realm instead of just going with life and trying to mask everything else. But again, as you mentioned, it takes a lot of courage and responsibility to do that. And again, it's a scary way of handling your shit because it brings up a lot of emotion. But on the other side of that, you are able to live a happier lifestyle and not worry constantly about your weight and the way you look. Shannon, I want to thank you so much for today's conversation. It has been so insightful.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a real joy to talk to you as well.
It's been lovely. Girls, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please make sure that you tag us at the Women's Fitness Academy, tag myself, tag Shannon. And then till next time, let's have those more meaningful and deeper conversations with ourselves.